Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. We love diving deep into a topic, and today we're going to be talking about Vincent van Gogh. You might already know a little about him, especially his sunflowers, right? But there's so much more to his story. And for today's deep dive, we're turning to Google Arts and Culture. And I'm already finding some pretty interesting stuff. One thing that surprised me right off the bat was that Van Gogh wasn't really famous during his lifetime.
It's true. It's pretty wild when you think about it, how he's this global icon now, but back then he was basically under the radar.
Right. It's kind of mind-blowing when you see how much he actually produced. I mean, Google Arts and Culture mentions he created something like 2,100 artworks in just a decade.
Yeah.
And get this, 860 of those were oil paintings, most of them done in just the last 2 years of his life.
Yeah. That's a crazy amount of work, especially for oil painting. It's not a quick process. So you can really see the dedication he had and how intensely he pursued his art.
Yeah, it's almost superhuman. Like, what was driving him? What fueled that fire? There's this Van Gogh quote from Google Arts and Culture that I think relates to this. If one is master of one thing and understands one thing well, one has at the same time insight into and understanding of many things. So I'm curious what you think. Does this quote reflect Van Gogh and his journey as an artist?
Totally. I think this quote really gets to the heart of how Van Gogh approached art. His development as an artist was incredibly fast. He went through these distinct phases, like his early works were darker and more somber. And then as he learned more about light and shadow, his palette shifted and became brighter and more vibrant. And his brushstrokes started out more controlled and traditional, but over time they evolved and became much more expressive, and you can really feel the emotion in them. This evolution in his style, his technique, his use of color, it all shows that he was always striving for mastery. And in that process, he gained a much deeper understanding, not just of painting, but of life itself.
That's fascinating. It sounds like he was always pushing the limits, experimenting with different approaches to really master his craft.
Exactly. And that experimentation is what led him to develop a style that was revolutionary for its time. The bold colors, the swirling brushstrokes, the intensity of the emotion in his work. It really set him apart from other artists of that era and paved the way for modern art.
It's funny, when I think of Van Gogh now, those swirling brushstrokes are the first thing that come to mind. Especially in his later work, Google Arts and Culture mentions he used this technique called impasto, where he applied the paint really thickly to create texture and depth.
Impasto is a huge part of understanding Van Gogh's later style. It adds so much visual energy to his work, but it also became this way for him to express emotion and this sort of raw energy. Like, it allowed him to capture the movement of a starry night or the vibrancy of a sunflower field.
It makes sense that he'd be drawn to a technique that's so expressive. His work feels so raw and emotionally charged. Google Arts and Culture also talks about his personal struggles, though, his mental health, and the fact that he never achieved commercial success while he was alive. It makes his dedication to his art even more poignant.
Definitely, there's this stark contrast between the brilliance of his art and the tragic reality of his life. He faced so much poverty, mental illness, lack of recognition during his lifetime. It really makes you wonder what he could have achieved if he'd received the support and recognition he deserved when he was still alive.
It's heartbreaking. But Google Arts and Culture does mention the incredible support he received from his brother Theo.
Yeah, Theo was more than just a brother. He was like Vincent's anchor, his confidant, his biggest supporter. He believed in Vincent's talent when no one else did, and he provided crucial financial support that allowed Vincent to keep painting. And their letters are amazing. They show this incredibly deep bond. Theo offered encouragement. He was a sounding board for Vincent's ideas, and he helped him navigate the art world and just stay afloat during difficult times.
Wow, their relationship sounds pretty remarkable. It makes you think about how their different perspectives might have influenced Vincent's art. Theo, the art dealer, immersed in the bustling art scene, and Vincent, the artist, seeking peace and inspiration in nature.
That's such a great point. We often think of artists as solitary figures, but relationships, especially close ones, can have a huge impact on their creativity. It would be interesting to dig deeper into how their conversations and their exchange of ideas may have shaped Vincent's style and choice of subjects.
Looking at the related works section on Google Arts and Culture, I saw some intriguing titles. Two Rats, The Night Cafe, and The Red Vineyard. What do you think these titles tell us about Van Gogh's range as an artist and his choice of subjects? I mean, two rats. That's not exactly sunflowers, is it?
Right. It's so interesting, right? These titles are like little peeks into his artistic world, and they hint at this incredibly diverse range. He wasn't just focused on sunflowers or landscapes. Take Two Rats, for example. It suggests this fascination with the mundane, the overlooked details of everyday life.
It's almost like he saw beauty in unexpected places, even in something as humble as two rats.
Exactly. He had this unique ability to elevate the ordinary, to find beauty in the simplest things. And then you have the Night Cafe, which shows his fascination with capturing atmosphere and emotion through color and light. And then there's the Red Vineyard, showcasing his mastery of capturing the energy and vibrancy of nature.
From rats to cafes to vineyards, his range is pretty impressive. And speaking of the Night Cafe, Google Arts and Culture mentions how he deliberately used clashing colors, reds and greens, to create a sense of unease, which I found really interesting. So he wasn't just painting what he saw, he was painting what he felt. That's powerful.
Exactly. He was very deliberate and symbolic in his use of color. He wasn't afraid to use jarring combinations to evoke specific emotions and convey deeper meaning. And this deliberate use of color is one of his trademarks. It's something that really set him apart from other artists at the time.
And that ties back to something we mentioned earlier, his fascination with chrome yellow, which Google Arts and Culture says played a big role in his artistic development. What's the story with this chrome yellow?
Okay, so chrome yellow wasn't just any yellow. It was this newly developed pigment in the 19th century known for being super vibrant and luminous. Van Gogh was totally captivated by it. He used it a lot, especially during his time in Arles, where the sunlight and landscapes inspired him to create some of his most famous works.
So it wasn't just about the color itself, but how that specific pigment captured the light and energy of the south of France.
Exactly. Chrome yellow represented the vibrancy and intensity that he wanted to express in his art. But there's a bit of a twist to this. Chrome yellow was actually really unstable and prone to fading, and that really bothered Van Gogh.
Wait, so some of his most famous works, those vibrant yellows, are actually fading over time? That's both sad and fascinating.
It is, and it adds this whole other layer to how we understand his work. Knowing that the colors we see today might not be the same ones he originally intended makes us think about how we interpret and preserve his legacy.
Wow, I never knew that about chrome yellow. It totally changes how I see his use of color. So on Google Arts and Culture, Van Gogh is mentioned alongside all these art movements, Post-Impressionism, modern art, even something called Japanism. I'm not even sure what that one is. Was he a lone wolf or part of a larger artistic trend?
That's a great question. It gets to the heart of Van Gogh's complex relationship with the art world of his time. He was definitely a part of those bigger artistic currents, but he also went beyond them in a lot of ways.
So he wasn't just following trends, he was shaping them.
Exactly. He was taking in influences, experimenting with them, and forging his own unique path. To understand his place in these movements, we need to look at each one individually. So, Post-Impressionism, for example, was a direct response to Impressionism. It aimed to move beyond just capturing fleeting moments and delve into deeper emotions and symbolism in art. Van Gogh definitely aligned with those core values, but his intensely personal and expressive style set him apart even within that movement.
So he took the foundation of Post-Impressionism and infused it with his own unique vision.
Exactly. He pushed the boundaries further, experimenting with color and form in ways that paved the way for modern art. And as for Japanism, that was this fascination with Japanese art and aesthetics that swept through Europe in the late 19th century.
Wait, Japanese art? That seems like a pretty big leap from the European art scene.
It might seem that way. But Van Gogh was always looking for new inspiration, and he became really interested in Japanese woodblock prints. He loved their bold compositions, their simplified forms, and their focus on nature and everyday life. He saw a simplicity and a directness in Japanese art that spoke to his own desire to capture the essence of things.
It sounds like he was drawn to the way Japanese art celebrated the beauty of everyday moments, something he also tried to do in his own work.
Exactly. He saw a kindred spirit in those Japanese artists. And you can see the influence of Japanism in a lot of his work. For example, Google Arts and Culture talks about his painting, The Bedroom, where he uses strong outlines and simplified forms, which are very reminiscent of the Japanese woodblock prints he loved.
Wow, I have to look at that painting again with fresh eyes. It's amazing how he blended all these different influences into his own distinct style. He took bits from Post-Impressionism, from Japanese art, from his own life experiences and combined them into something totally new.
That's the mark of a true innovator. He wasn't just imitating or copying, he was absorbing, experimenting, and transforming those influences into something entirely his own.
Okay, this is blowing my mind already. But before we get too carried away, let's take a step back. We've been talking a lot about his paintings, but I'm curious about his use of other mediums.
While oil painting was his main thing, Van Gogh was incredibly versatile. Google Arts and Culture lists a bunch of other mediums he explored: drawing, ink, graphite, pen, and charcoal.
Wow, I had no idea he worked with so many different mediums.
Yes. And it just shows his constant desire to experiment and find new ways to express himself. He wasn't afraid to push boundaries, and he clearly enjoyed the challenge of mastering different artistic tools.
It seems like he never stopped exploring, never stopped pushing himself creatively. It makes you wonder, what would he have achieved if he'd had more time?
That's a question that still fascinates art historians and art lovers today. But even in his short life, he produced a body of work that continues to captivate and inspire the world.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground, but it feels like we've only scratched the surface of Van Gogh's world.
You're absolutely right. There's so much more to discover about his life, his influences, and his lasting legacy. But before we dive deeper, I'm curious, what stands out to you so far? What has surprised you the most about Van Gogh's story?
To be honest, it's all been pretty surprising. I mean, I knew about the sunflowers and Starry Night, but I had no idea just how much he created, or all the different mediums he used, or that whole thing about Japanese art influencing him, plus the chrome yellow fading thing. It's wild. It's like these paintings are alive and changing, not just static images.
Yeah, that's a great point. It speaks to the whole challenge of art conservation and preservation. We're always trying to understand the materials artists use and how they've changed over time so we can preserve their vision as accurately as possible.
You don't really think about how much work goes on behind the scenes, so we can still enjoy these masterpieces centuries later. You know, that quote we talked about earlier about how mastering one thing leads to a deeper understanding of other things makes me wonder, did Van Gogh ever feel like he achieved that mastery he was talking about?
That's a really interesting question. He was always pushing himself and experimenting, but he also expressed doubts and frustrations in his letters. It seems like he was constantly striving for something more, something he couldn't quite reach.
So even someone as talented as Van Gogh had self-doubt. It's kind of reassuring, actually. It makes him seem more human, more relatable.
Right. The whole tortured genius thing can be misleading. Creative work for anyone is full of ups and downs, moments of brilliance mixed with self-doubt and struggle. And in Van Gogh's case, his mental health definitely played a role in how he saw himself as an artist.
It makes you appreciate his perseverance even more. Despite those struggles, he kept creating, kept exploring. And speaking of exploring, we were talking about those intriguing titles. Two Rats, The Night Cafe, The Red Vineyard. They make me want to learn more about what he was trying to capture with those different subjects.
Those titles are a great starting point. Like we said, Two Rats could be about his interest in the mundane, but it could also be a reflection on the harsher side of life, poverty, survival. You know, it's definitely not your typical sunflower painting.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. Gives a whole new meaning to what seemed like a simple subject.
Exactly. And The Night Cafe is another interesting one. Google Arts and Culture mentions that he wanted to show the terrible passions of humanity in this painting. He used clashing colors and an unsettling perspective to create an atmosphere that really reflects the darker side of human experience.
It's like he was painting a feeling and emotion, not just a scene.
Exactly. He wasn't afraid to explore those darker aspects of life, the things people usually avoid. And this brings us back to the idea of mastery. Maybe true mastery isn't just about technical skill, but also about having the courage to face difficult emotions and express them honestly through art.
That's deep. And it makes me think about his landscapes like the Red Vineyard. They seem so vibrant and full of life. But knowing about his struggles, could they also be expressing a longing for peace and a connection with nature?
That's a beautiful interpretation, and it's definitely possible. His landscapes often have this sense of longing, a search for beauty and peace in the midst of chaos. And his use of color, especially those intense yellows, could be seen as a way of capturing the fleeting beauty of nature, a way of holding on to it even when everything else felt like it was falling apart.
It's like he was trying to fill his paintings with hope, even when he maybe didn't feel it himself. And speaking of hope, I keep thinking about that powerful relationship with his brother Theo. It seems like that connection was a lifeline for him, a source of support during those dark times.
Absolutely. Theo's belief in Vincent's talent, his constant emotional and financial support, it was crucial. Their letters show such deep affection and understanding. It's clear Theo saw the genius in Vincent's work, even when no one else did.
It reminds you that even brilliant minds need support, encouragement, someone who truly believes in them. We've talked a lot about his Western influences like Post-Impressionism, but I'm still curious about Japanism. What specifically drew Van Gogh to Japanese art?
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. Imagine 19th century Europe. There was this huge fascination with all things Japanese sweeping through the art world, and Van Gogh, always eager for new ideas, was captivated by Japanese woodblock prints. He admired their bold compositions, their flat areas of color, the focus on nature and everyday life. He saw the simplicity and directness in Japanese art that resonated with his own desire to capture the essence of things.
It sounds like he was drawn to the way Japanese art celebrated the beauty of ordinary moments, which is something he also tried to do in his work.
Yeah. Exactly. He saw a kindred spirit in those Japanese artists. And you can see the influence of Japonism in several of his works, like Google Arts and Culture mentions The Bedroom, where he uses those strong outlines and simplified forms, just like the Japanese woodblock prints he loved.
Wow, I'll have to take another look at that painting. It's amazing how he blended all these different influences into his own unique style. Post-Impressionism, Japanese art, his own experiences, all combined into something totally new.
That's what makes him such an innovator. He wasn't just mimicking, he was absorbing, experimenting, and transforming those influences into something completely his own.
And that brings us back to mastery. Maybe true mastery isn't about reaching some perfect endpoint or style. It's about that constant evolution, that willingness to learn and adapt and push boundaries.
You're right. Mastery is a journey, not a destination. And Van Gogh's journey, even though it was tragically cut short, was one of constant exploration and growth.
This deep dive has really changed how I see Van Gogh. He's so much more than just a sunflower painter. He was a complex person struggling with his own demons, but also driven by this incredible passion to create and express himself.
He was a true visionary. He pushed the boundaries of art and challenged how people saw the world.
And it's incredible how his work still resonates with people today. Those swirling colors, the emotional intensity, the way he captured the beauty of everyday life, it's timeless. It speaks to something deep within us.
Absolutely. And I think part of what makes him so enduring is his vulnerability. He didn't shy away from showing his struggles, his doubts, his joys, his sorrows. He put his soul into his art, and that honesty, that rawness is what connects with people even today.
It makes you wonder, what else is there to discover about Van Gogh? What other layers are hidden beneath the surface of his work?
That's the beauty of art and history. There's always more to uncover, more to learn, more to appreciate.
I feel like we've only just scratched the surface with this deep dive. It's really interesting how much we focus on the finished piece, the masterpiece hanging in a museum. But we don't often think about the process, the journey that led to its creation. It's cool to imagine all the different stages Van Gogh went through, the experiments, the failures, the breakthroughs that all led up to those iconic works we know and love.
You've hit on something important there. The journey is just as important as the destination. And Van Gogh's artistic evolution was all about constantly exploring, trying new things, pushing boundaries, and yeah, sometimes even failing.
It makes me think about when he lived in Paris. Google Arts and Culture mentions how he got to know the Impressionists like Monet and Renoir, and how their use of light and color really changed his style.
His time in Paris was huge for him. He was like soaking up all these new ideas and techniques. The Impressionists' focus on capturing fleeting moments and the way light plays inspired him to experiment with brighter colors and looser brushstrokes. But he didn't just copy them. He took those ideas and made them his own, infused them with his own emotional intensity and expressive style.
So even when he was inspired by others, he always found a way to put his own unique spin on things. He was never just a follower, always trying to create something new and original.
Exactly. And that brings us back to that quote about mastery. I think Van Gogh's journey shows us that mastery isn't about reaching some perfect endpoint or style. It's about constantly learning, adapting, and refining your craft.
It's about pushing yourself beyond what's comfortable, experimenting with new approaches, and not being afraid to fail along the way. It's kind of encouraging to know that even someone as talented as Van Gogh had to go through those struggles and doubts. It makes the whole idea of artistic development feel more attainable even for us regular folks.
I totally agree. It reminds us that creativity is a process, not a product. It's about showing up, doing the work, and embracing the journey wherever it takes you.
And speaking of journeys, I'm curious about something we haven't talked about much yet. His letters, Google Arts and Culture, mentions that Van Gogh wrote tons of letters, especially to his brother Theo. What can we learn from those?
Oh, his letters are amazing. They're like a window into his thoughts, his feelings, his struggles with art. You can see his passion for art, his deep connection to nature, his incredible sensitivity to the world around him. Reading his letters is like having a conversation with him. You hear his voice, you understand his perspective on life and art.
It's like getting a glimpse into a soul beyond just the brushstrokes and the paintings.
Exactly. They give you a much richer, more nuanced understanding of the man behind the masterpieces. And they also show how important human connection was, especially for someone like Van Gogh, who often felt isolated and misunderstood.
I'm definitely putting those letters on my reading list. I feel like this deep dive has opened up so many new ways to explore Van Gogh's world. We've talked about his influences, his techniques, his struggles, his relationship with his brother, his letters, even that whole thing about chrome yellow fading. It's amazing how one artist's story can be so multifaceted and complex.
It really is. And that's what makes art so fascinating. It's not just about what looks good, it's about understanding the human experience, the emotions, the ideas, the stories that are woven into every brushstroke.
Well, this deep dive has been an incredible journey, and I have a feeling it's just the beginning of my exploration of Van Gogh's world. So, to our listeners out there, I encourage you to take what we've talked about today as a starting point and continue your own deep dive into Van Gogh's life and work.
There's so much out there to explore his letters, in-depth analyses of his paintings, the whole story behind Chrome Yellow. Who knows, maybe you'll find something new, some hidden detail or personal connection that speaks to you in a unique way.
After all, Van Gogh's story reminds us that true artistry isn't just about technical skill. It's about having the courage to express yourself authentically, to explore the world with open eyes, and to find beauty in the unexpected. So keep exploring. Keep questioning and keep discovering the Van Goghs within yourselves and in the world around you.
Beautifully said. And remember, sometimes the most profound insights come from diving deep, from looking beyond the surface and discovering the hidden treasures that lie beneath.
Until next time, happy exploring.